Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our second series with the League of Women Voters, Atlanta, Fulton County. I'd like to take this time to introduce to you our moderator for this evening, Dr. Maria Boynton. She is the News Brand Manager and Public Affairs Director for Audacity Atlanta, formerly Intercom and CBS Atlanta. In that role, Maria supervises the news and traffic reporters for V103, WAOK, Star 94.1, and V103 and WAOK, and the host of the public affairs program, Atlanta Up Close. Maria joined the Atlanta stations following 20 years of covering presidential campaigns, more than a decade at CNN, and after working in some of the country's major media and broadcast markets, including New York City. In October, Maria will be inducted into the Georgia Association Broadcasters Hall of Fame. She is the 2021 Legacy Visionary Award recipient for the Atlanta chapter of the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Communications, which is the acronym ANAMIC Atlanta. Among her other honors are 2 Peabody Awards and 2 DuPont Awards for collaborative efforts. She's also received the Dream Forward Award from the King Center and a Georgia House of Representatives resolution for her career and community contributions. Maria is a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated and is a frequent MC host for charity events, including the Lupus Foundation of America, Georgia chapter, the National Kidney Foundation, and the American Cancer Society. She also serves as a member of the National Kidney Foundation's Atlanta Advisory Board. We welcome now our own Dr. Maria Boynton.
Oh, Corliss Davenport, no one can do it better than you. You know, I'm going to keep you around because every time you introduce me, you do an awesome job. Corliss Davenport, thank you so very much. And welcome, everyone. It's so good to be here this evening. It's a rainy night in parts of Georgia and parts of Metro Atlanta, but we persevere, don't we all? Of course, we're talking about redistricting and reapportionment 2021. This is the community series that Corliss referred to educate, empower, and to engage. We have 3 wonderful panelists this evening, and welcome to part 2 of the League of Women Voters of Fulton and of Atlanta and Fulton County. Thank you to President Nicola Hines for having me here this evening to ask me back as we, of course, move along as we are in this world today. It is part 2, Empowering the Community, Redistricting 101, Tools to Advocate. As I mentioned, 3 wonderful panelists this evening. We have Christopher Bruce, who is with the ACLU of Georgia, the political director, Ken Lawler with Fair Districts Georgia, board chair of that, Angela Brown, who is with the, of course, the ATL Count Census 2020 executive director of that. These are people that I've interviewed on several occasions as we, of course, at the stations, we began, if you remember, as CBS Radio Atlanta, then we were purchased by Intercom, and now we're Odyssey. So when we talk about change, of course, at my company, we do know about change. Redistricting in Georgia, what is it and how will it affect you? So this evening, and again, I thank you for everyone that's joining us this evening, continuing to come on. We're gonna have each panelist that I just introduced, we're gonna have them to discuss their organizations and their roles. But first, I'm going to tell you more about each particular panelist. Let's talk about Angela Elizabeth Brown. She gave us her entire legal name. Angela Elizabeth Brown, in a public service and business career that spans more than 4 decades, Angela Elizabeth Brown has worked across political, religious, and social lines to champion economic development, humanitarian assistance, education, health and human services, intercultural and interfaith cooperation for the most vulnerable people throughout local neighborhoods and across the globe. For the past 10 years, Angela has worked with influential leaders as well as on the ground with grassroots communities to foster peace, reconciliation, and economic progress. Recently, she worked alongside leaders of Black Lives Matter, offering training and support, as well as building one of the largest programs to challenge food scarcity in Metro Atlanta. As executive director of ATL Count Census 2020, Angela led the city of Atlanta's efforts to ensure that Black and Brown communities would be counted in the 2020 decennial census, ensuring that Atlanta would receive billions of dollars over the next 10 years. And I'm sure that she, of course, is going to let us know how that went and if we're going to be getting all that money, Angela. Okay. Up next, Ken Lawler. Ken is the chair of the board of Fair Districts, Georgia. Since joining the organization in 2019, he has advocated for redistricting reform directly with members of the Georgia General Assembly. He has also been instrumental in driving a data-driven approach to redistricting. This includes establishing a partnership with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project to bring state-of-the-art statistical methods to Georgia, supporting the creation of fair maps. As chair, Ken is now leading the overall effort to prevent another gerrymander during the 2021 redistricting cycle. He is also the founder of Our Imperfect Union, a platform advocating for reform of government nationally. Ken has worked through multiple organizations to accomplish this, including the Georgia chapter of No Labels to promote bipartisanship in Congress. He has also advocated for constitutional amendments to overturn Citizens United. Follow Ken's advocacy at ourimperfectunion.org. And Ken started his involvement in political causes following a 39-year career as an IBM consultant and executive. Hello, Ken. Wave at everybody. Hey. And of course, Christopher Bruce is political director of the ACLU of Georgia. Christopher Bruce Esquire is the political director for the ACLU of Georgia. And Bruce has been a leader in the fight for civil rights and liberties across the state and country. He led a campaign against suppressing the Black vote in South Atlanta by preventing the closure of polling locations in majority Black districts during the 2016 mayoral election. In his first year as a lobbyist with the ACLU of Georgia, Chris defeated a bill which added sentencing enhancements purposely targeting Black Lives Matter protesters. In that same year, he led a coalition to defeat legislation that would have labeled protesters as domestic terrorists. Bruce has also led a coalition of civil rights leaders and organizations that defeated legislation which would have jeopardized early voting hours and eliminated Sunday voting or Souls to the Polls programs. We all remember the start of that, right? Chris graduated cum laude from Georgia State University and obtained his law degree from the University of Georgia. Bruce has also held positions of influence outside of the ACLU of Georgia, including being on the policy executive board of the Atlanta Pre-Arrest Diversion Program, executive board for Gates City Bar Association, which of course is one of the oldest Black bar associations in the United States, Atlanta Council for Younger Lawyers and New Leaders Council. Bruce is a member of the Lead Atlanta 2016 class and a recipient of the 2016 Outstanding Atlanta Award, the highest award that can be bestowed to a young professional in Atlanta. He has been featured in publications such as the Wall Street Journal and National Public Radio, and been a guest lecturer at many universities, including Harvard Law School, University of Georgia School of Law, and Emory University. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you Christopher Bruce. Hey, Chris. Good to see each and every one of you this evening. Thanks again to everyone that's joining us, because we're here for an education. We're here to learn the ins and outs of redistricting and reapportionment 2021. Thanks again to the League of Women Voters of Atlanta. Fulton County President Nicola Hines is here, everyone. And let's get this ball rolling. Each panelist is going to discuss their organization and their role. And first, of course, we're going to begin with none other than Ken Lawler, who is with the Fair Districts Georgia. He is chair of the board. Take it away, Ken Lawler.
Well, thank you very much, Maria, and it's a pleasure to be. It's an honor to be on the panelist with such esteemed folks around the Atlanta area. We are Fair Justice Georgia is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Our sole mission is to focus on redistricting. We know that's a part of a much larger fight that we've all been fighting in Georgia this year around fair elections. We think that fair districts are really the other side of the coin, in addition to all the voting rights things that have gone on this year in the state of Georgia. I thought we would set the stage just a little bit about just kind of talk about where we are in the process. So I'm going to share a very short presentation deck at this time, just to kind of talk about where we are in the process. And there's a piece of news out today about the time frame that I think people will want to know. So let me do that, and I'll try not to take up too much time with this, but just to give you kind of set the stage of where we are in the process. I assume everybody can hear that, right? Everybody can see the screen at this point? Good. Okay, good. So look, first of all, we count the League of Women Voters across the state and the Atlanta Fulton County chapter as really key participants in this fight. We've had wonderful collaboration with the League across the state this year. We appreciate the chance to come and speak again to you. When we spoke with you back in April, I should say, we're just getting started on things. We talk a little bit about our strategy. We mentioned this idea that we're working with Princeton. I'm going to share with you some interesting results tonight, again, in a very short presentation. Just to talk about where we are, the timeline, just to kind of put this in perspective, right? So in the June 15 to July 30 timeframe right now, we are in the process where the local hearings by the state legislative redistricting committees are going on. I think everybody knows that. The last hearings are taking place this week. Your last chance to testify in person or virtually will be this week. We'll give you some dates and locations for that in just a minute. Following that, on August 16th, we get the first release of the census data. We believe that a large part of the map drawing process can begin based on that August 16th data, but there's another drop of data on the 30th, which is when the full redistricting toolkit will come out. Now, what that means is that the legislature is going to be starting to draw maps probably late August, but certainly no later than October 1. What we heard just today in a news article published in the AJC was that Speaker Ralston was asked by an AJC person, I think it was Patricia Murphy, about when the special session was going to occur. He had previously talked about this vague time frame of when the frost is on the pumpkin. He revealed today that it's actually going to be around Halloween. So that gives us a little bit better headlight into the compressed time frame that we're operating under here, right? We're going to get the final data at the end of September. By the end of October, they would like to have a special session to start voting on maps that have been drafted for comment, right? So it's a very compressed time frame compared to what it was in years past. And that, of course, has us concerned because in the past, this delay is because of the census being delayed. But in the past, it's taken 4 months to draw these maps. Now we're going to try to get it done in, let's say, a month or a month and a half. That's of concern in terms of quality of the maps and in terms of the ability of us as the public to comment on the maps. And we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So that's kind of new news about the time frame, but it kind of tells you where we are. So right now we're kind of in public hearing mode, and then we're going to shift gears into map drawing mode pretty soon, upcoming pretty soon. The challenges that we see going on this year, this compressed time frame I already mentioned, right? I think that the legislature is trying to get these maps released and potentially even voted on by early November so that people who want to run for state house, state legislature, state senate know what district they live in. They have to live in their district for a year. And so it would be nice to know what district you actually live in to determine whether you want to run in that district, right? So that's a legitimate requirement, legitimate request. However, the compressed time frame has us concerned. Now, our other concern, next one, is about a secret process, right? So there are these public hearings that we're having now are nice, and you're going to have a chance to testify at those hearings if you haven't already, but they're not enough because all these hearings are occurring before we have data, before we have maps. And frankly, the whole process is not designed for public participation. The bulk of this work, all the map drawing, goes on behind closed doors. It is protected by law with secrecy provisions. And what will happen is at the very end, when the special session occurs, out will pop the maps, and we'll have a very short time frame in which to comment on these maps. The third concern we have is that it's a partisan process, right? The majority party has the power. We have seen, dating back to the 2000 redistricting cycle, 2001, Democrats were in charge. Now the Republicans are in charge. Because we have almost no standards in Georgia law, and now that we have this wealth of data and powerful software, gerrymandering is rampant. We know it occurs, and it's an issue, right? And so how do we get fair maps? That's really the question. So, we in fair districts are asking the legislature to do 3 things differently this time around. We call it listen, show your work, and check your work. Listening to us means these community hearings that you're having, we are attending almost all of them. I know Chris, the ACLU is as well. We're giving a lot of input. A lot of citizens across the state are giving input. What happens to that input is going to be critical. How is the legislature going to respond to all that input that they get? That's really critical to show that they're really listening to what citizens have to say about how they think they should be represented in our state house, our state senate, and our Congress. Showing your work really means let's make the process more public and transparent. Several of our organizations, I know the ACLU and Fair Districts did, as well as others, sent a letter in April to the committees asking for about 15 specific changes to make the process more public. We have yet to hear a response to that letter. We intend to keep asking for this process to be made more transparent, to release more data, to give us more time to review these maps when they come out. We are hopeful that we'll get some changes there. I'm doubtful, but let's give it a go, right? And lastly, check your work. This is something brand new that we are able to do. We are asking the legislature to use independent, nonpartisan benchmarks or fairness tests for districts. Now, how do we do that? Well, that's never been possible before, but now it is. And Fair Districts Georgia is pioneering this effort in Georgia for the very first time. We have a partnership that we established with the Princeton Gerrymandering Project. It's part of the Princeton Electoral Innovation Lab at Princeton University. We are going to provide independent, nonpartisan fairness tests for our maps before they're even released. We're doing this in 2 phases. Phase 1 is now complete. We've looked at a 20-year history back to the 2000 census, the 2001 cycle, the 2011 cycle, all the way through 2020. And we have released now a full report, and you can get a copy of that report at that bit.ly or check our website. And I'm going to share with you in a minute the key one summary page of the findings from that report. What it shows is that over the last 2 redistricting cycles and all the mid-cycle redistricting that's taken place, meaning redistricting that happens without a census, just done to help with protect incumbents, that we've had a lot of gerrymandering in the state, right? And we don't like it. This is what Fair Districts Georgia fights. So the 20-year history report is now done. Now we can look forward to the next phase 2, which is based on the 2020 census. When we get that data in August, we are going to produce fairness tests for these new maps. And the fairness test will tell us what should the partisan balance be of the state house and the state senate and the congressional maps, and what should be the minority representation. What % of the districts should be Voting Rights Act compliant, meaning they have at least 50% a minority population, and what about the opportunity districts, those that are just slightly under 50%, but which provide another opportunity for minorities to be represented, right? So the phase 2 part is what we're leading up to here, which is we will produce benchmarks, and then when the maps are drawn, we will evaluate them in a hurry. And so hopefully that becomes part of the process where we are advocating for a better set of maps. Very quickly, this is what the scorecard shows for the maps in the past. I won't read everything on this chart, but let me just say that where you see a red X, we say the map fails the test, and you see a green check mark, the map looks okay. State House fails the check for partisan balance in the past because we think it has 1 to 7 fewer Democratic districts than a bunch of, than a test that we ran against unbiased and neutral maps. It has enough competitive districts, and it looks like it has enough districts, enough minority representation across the top line of the chart. However, we have seen a lot of gerrymandering back in the 2001 timeframe and back in the 2011 timeframe, and there was extensive mid-cycle redistricting, meaning adjustments to the maps not required by a court, not required by a census, just to protect incumbents. So we see this going on. We can see that activity as bills go through the legislature. It tells us that the maps are being manipulated for political purposes. The state senate map fares much worse in our test. It fails all 3 tests. It's got too few Democratic districts. It has fewer competitive districts, and it's actually missing minority opportunity districts. It has enough compliant districts that are compliant with the law, but it has no opportunity districts, and there should be about 1 to 3 according to our view. Now, again, I'm referring to Democratic districts being light here. That doesn't mean I am advocating for more Democratic districts. What I want is, what fair districts want is, we want a fair map that reflects the natural political geography of Georgia. However many Republican and Democratic districts there should be is based on the voting patterns of Georgia and not based on some politician who wants to draw a map. So that's why we're doing these benchmarks. The congressional maps, however, seem to pass the test as of now, as of the 2016 to 2020 timeframe. They're partisan balance okay. There's 2 competitive districts in Georgia, and there should be 2, and there are enough Black majority districts as well. However, those have also been subject to mid-cycle redistricting to protect incumbents. So the point of this is to say that we can see clear evidence in the past that we've had maps manipulated for political purposes. But now imagine that instead of looking backwards, we're looking forwards. And so when the census data comes out, we will be able to produce new benchmarks of fairness tests, and we'll be able to tell people, we're going to release this to the public. We're also going to give this to the legislature, and we're going to be able to say how many Republican or Democratic districts should there be? What's the range? How many should be competitive? And what should be the right level of minority representation? So this is a very powerful tool that Georgia has never had before. This kind of analysis has never been done before. We are bringing it to Georgia and offering it to the public and to the legislature. And of course, we'll be bringing that back to all the League of Women Voters chapters across the state once we have that data. And then once the maps are produced by the legislature and released for that special session, we will very rapidly check the maps against these benchmarks, and we will be able to tell you if these maps, we think, meet or pass or fail the tests. Now, in the meantime, what can we do now, right? So clearly there's still opportunities to testify to the committees. We'll talk about that in a second. We run a big letters to the editor program where we are placing letters to the editor in community newspapers across the state. We've been fairly successful about that. Old-fashioned postcarding, we just, in fact, released an avalanche, we call it an avalanche, of 20,000 postcards delivered to the members of the 2 redistricting committees in the House and the Senate. Those landed on their desks sometime in June, and we're going to do another avalanche in August. And then obviously you can help, advocate for your community. In terms of testimony, here are the hearings opportunities that are left. There's one going on tonight that is almost done, so I'm not including that. But there's one in Columbus and Macon, and a virtual one on Friday, which you can sign up for. There's one that was canceled in Augusta that needs to be reset. We don't know what the date for that one is. If you want to find the hearings, go to legis.ga.gov and you'll find those hearings. And the ones that are in person, you go to the hearings, you can find the locations, you can sign up to testify. You can also submit written testimony to the legislature, and that you can find on their website or at that bit.ly/written testimony GA. Now, if you were going to testify, what would you want to say? Well, I think you could say you could take a couple approaches. One is to talk about the process and say, we want transparency, we want fairness. Feel free to quote our materials or the ACLU's materials or anybody's materials around what makes maps fair. But it's even more powerful to talk about your community and make this local, because the committees are really asking you to understand, for you to tell the committees, how should my community be represented? How do I define my community, and how can I be represented? And we have a map room that you can use to study your community in some detail on Fair Districts Georgia website. And there's also a testimony toolkit available on our website. Talking about your community is essential. This is an example of what happened in the State House map from 2010 through 2015. This is an example of what we call the split cities problem. 2/3 of the small cities in Georgia have been cracked, meaning broken up, so that they don't have cohesive representation. In 2010, the city of Lawrenceville, which is the case here, was all part of one district in 2010. And the population of Lawrenceville was enough so that they could have elected a representative of their choice. But by 2015, after several changes, the city of Lawrenceville, still about 31,000 people, is now split up into 6 districts. So if I was a resident of Lawrenceville, I don't think I would like this. I would rather have a single representative, or maybe 2, advocating for me, instead of having my city split up into many, many chunks. Now that doesn't apply in the city of Atlanta, but it certainly can apply in other communities in the Atlanta-Fulton County area. And so this is one thing that you can talk about, is as far as your community, make it a community level conversation. Now, I'm going to stop there, I think, and hopefully that kind of sets the lay of the land and tells you kind of where we are in the process. I'll stop there, and I'll turn the program over to the next speaker.
So Ken, if you could just in a roundabout way, just one quick little paragraph, exactly what does your organization do? Oh, sorry, yes. So we advocate for fair maps. We advocate for fair maps, and in the long run, we are about changing the process. We advocate for legislation that would make the process more fair in the long run. So a constitutional amendment to turn over the redistricting to an independent commission would be nice.
We're not going to get that now, but that's one of our long-term goals, right? So our organization is about advocating for maps through these tools and processes that I talked about, and in the long run, reforming the process.
Okay, Ken Lawler is board chair of Fair Districts Georgia. Thank you for that presentation, Ken. Up next is Angela Brown with ATO Count Census 2020 Executive Director. Her media savvy is, above reproach, because she knows how to get in touch with us. She knows what message has to be put out there. And of course, with the 2020 census, there were some shenanigans. I'm sorry, I'm a member of the media, but I'm going to say it. There were some shenanigans going on where, we thought the census was going forward, then it was pulled back, then it was going forward. And as a member of the media, I was like, okay, what are we doing right now? So Angela, why don't you tell us about ATO Count Census 2020 and what's going on? Thank you. You're on mute. Okay.
Thank you for that.
First
of all, I appreciate the League of Women Voters for this opportunity to share what I have been involved in for the last, it began actually, I was called as executive director for Atlanta Count Census 2020 under our 60th mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, and served there as the executive director to do that work. And so it's really been a phenomenal process. As you have well articulated, we went from, full count, and then we got hit with a pandemic, and then we shut down, and then we came back and we worked through the pandemic, and then the previous US presidential administration shut down the census, then they started it back. And so it's been a mess, right? And so I do want to say though that Atlanta actually beat its 2010 numbers barely by the skin of our teeth, but we got through it, right? And so, which was important. So just a little background, Atlanta was unusual in that the previous mayor, Mayor Reeds, set aside $1 million. And so when I started the census, we had this pot of money to be able to do this outreach. And that legislation was actually carried then by City Councilwoman at the time, Keisha Lance Bottoms. And so we were able to hit the ground running, unlike most cities in the entire United States, right? But there are some cities who are continuing to count. They never stop counting. They have a full census department like New York City, LA, and some other places that actually never stop counting. Why that's important is because we only think of the census every 10 years. But the truth is that the Census Bureau, US Census Bureau never stops counting. You have the American Community Survey that will come out. So all of this data is important. And I do want to share my screen because I am all things census. And what's interesting is that the same process that we had to use to try to get people to fill this census out, I think is the same kind of like dogmatic processes that we have to go through to try to get people to get engaged now in this redistricting process. And so some of the tools that folk have used in this process that I believe are necessary, and it doesn't really even matter. I'm going to share my screen, share. So I pulled this because I think this is the easiest. The US Census Bureau has put together data gems, but they also have, I mean, you can kind of get lost at the US Census Bureau, but they also have a way in which communities can do community mapping. You can do all kinds of things with the data from the census. So most people don't realize, but even for something as simple as your ancestry, right? You can go to the census for free and pull all of that information on even your ancestors. So whether it's that, all the way up until now, if you wanted to do community mapping and find out what's in your neighborhood, this census data, that's why it's so important. And I love what Ken and them are doing around this redistricting to look at this whole process. But if you feel lost, don't, right? So literally we changed the census process for the city of Atlanta on their senior housing stuff, for instance, because we were just like pit bulls with the folk who were literally sitting in DC, and we were raising questions saying, no, do you determine or we determine whether or not this is considered senior housing? So the data, the folk who are sitting behind doing this data for the U.S. Census Bureau are real people, and you can have real access. Just call them, right? But they've also made this particular tool available so that you can figure out how to do mapping in your community, how to access apportionment results. So they've done all of these little web things for you, and there's a whole plethora. I really encourage that if you're interested in getting down to it, and Kingdom have done some of this. This is what they've used to kind of project and to see where we're going, what kind of maps, what kind of elected officials we could probably shape and will end up with, is all based on the census. And there's nothing. And one of the things that I keep trying to get people to understand, I'm all things census, y'all. And because of that, the stories in our communities, the way in which we've been able to engage young people, the way in which we were able to engage our seniors was really to talk about, how does this impact you? People often will ask the question about, we often say, well, why does West End not have the same kind of resources? You know, it's always overcrowded. Our banks are overcrowded. We have, you know, food deserts. But it all starts with the census. So if you have 10,000 people that live in a community and only 1,000 have filled that census out, they base whether or not you're going to get resources, whether you're going to be counted in this map, whether or not you can get a Kroger to come to your neighborhood, all starts with this census. And unfortunately, whether you filled it out or didn't, we have to live with your decision for the next 10 years. And so that's why we, Ken and Chris will continue to, those organizations will continue to press to make sure that we are engaged as a community, that we're engaged in our neighborhoods, we're engaged on our state level to make this right. Because if we don't, we will lose that representation if we don't continue to fight for it. And honestly, these little videos that they're doing that help the average person understand this data really does work. You can go to the website, you can figure it out. If you wanted to look at the access data for your congressional district, one of the amazing things that we found out in this process that I didn't know, but if you wanted to look at race and ethnicity across decades, you can map from 1790 when the census started until current. And when you follow it, it's the slave ships, y'all, that dumped African people along the trail are also the same areas where you have low representation of folk who have filled out or did the census count, which means the districts also. So the census is all about power and it's all about money. And so whether or not we get our fair share determines whether or not we're able to continue to engage the community to, yes, look at these maps, stay in this process, go to these hearings. I know it's boring. I know it's something that takes a lot for us to do, but we got to do the hard work. And I don't think that any city, any municipality, anywhere should ever stop counting, should ever not have a census department that's actually that they can go to. Sometimes it's converted to your planning department, which will have this, and people can engage even your plan. There's a lot of organizations that base their numbers and will help a regular citizen to figure out the information that they need. And so again, I'm all things census. And when it comes to redistricting, this is what we need. These are the tools I believe that will help us to better understand what they use to determine our outcomes for this redistricting process. So,
Angela, why don't you tell them what your name on the streets? What's your street name? When they see you coming, what do they call you?
It depends on what street.
Census related.
Well, you know, here comes the census lady.
Yeah.
Here comes the right reverend. It just all depends on what street you own. But yeah, so the census here, you know, I annoyed people on the census. Even our mayor got to the point like, she like, Angela, I got census overload. I'm like, I know, and I do understand, but we ran a hell of a campaign just on the census, just to try to get these numbers. Of course, we were disappointed, disappointed in the process, but at the end of the day, we did barely, you know, get past our 2010.
Okay.
And historically, Atlanta had to sue the US government Census Bureau on the census process because they felt like we had not been counted. And unfortunately, people don't know that. I mean, every aspect of this process is so crucial. You have to sue based on geography. So if there's a neighborhood or area that has not been counted, then you can sue and say, okay, you left this group or this geographic region out of the count. Then you can get a recount. But I think the previous mayor understood that, which is why they set aside the money. And I really encourage us, let's not stop on the census. Let's continue to get this going over and over to keep it in our forefronts. Because even as a grassroots organization, when we start wanting to go after those dollars, it's really based, you need that data to be able to pull to determine who's in the community and who's in the neighborhood that you're trying to serve. And so I can't say enough about the census. Just get on their website and just explore. Use the data tools, call them, whatever you need to do. You don't have to be a data expert. They have webinars, they have everything to try to engage the community themselves. And I certainly encourage that we use those tools.
I think each one of you guys here, the panelists, you know, each one of your area of expertise, if we started to delve into it a little bit more, it could become addictive. You know, trying to see how the census works, the map drawings, and of course, all the legal ramifications of it all, Chris, right? So it can be addictive. It truly can. So thank you very much to Ken Lawler and Angela Brown. Up next, we have Christopher Bruce with the ACLU of Georgia, Political Director. Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about ACLU, what you do there, and give us your presentation.
Maria, happy to do that. And thank you for all that you've done. Thank you for moderating this panel. You've always been such a stalwart in our community, especially getting out the real information. There's so much misinformation out there. Maria, you've always been pushing for real information. Angela, Ken, thank you for all that you do. And definitely
checks in the mail.
Thank you. Keep being yourself. So what I want to start off with is ACLU is a nonpartisan, and I'm going to go deeper into this because I want to emphasize that we are a nonpartisan organization that is a nonprofit that is focused on your civil rights and civil liberties. So it literally spans the gamut. When there were protesters in the streets, it wasn't a Democrat or Republican type of thing. We sent out legal observers who were saying, you have a First Amendment right to protest in the streets. When it's in my bio, it said when you have Black Lives Matter protesters being targeted at the Capitol of aggrandizing penalties for them. We helped to get that bill stricken and ultimately defeated. The first bill I ever worked on in 2017 was a bill where the Planned Parenthood lobbyist came up to me with HB 515, slapped the bill in my chest, literally, and said, this is an ACLU issue because it is a gerrymandering issue. That Planned Parenthood lobbyist is now our US Congresswoman, Nikema Williams, for the 5th District, taking over John Lewis. So this is all coming together from fruition of people who've been working on these type of issues literally forever. And when it comes down to it, I'm a local Black man. So you will hear in my bio, we defeated this in a coalition. We defeated that in a coalition. That's why we enjoy working with Fair Districts, Leave Women Voters, and the plethora of other organizations out there trying to really fight for your voice. And we're doing that by going to all of these hearings and attending these type of meetings together of saying, I'm going to be there, or somebody from my team is currently testifying right now. Ken's going to be there, somebody's from the team. Angela is going to annoy you about redistricting the whole time. The thing that we really need right now is you. The thing that we really need are the people who are watching this program right now of saying, you can do this as well, because at the Capitol, like Angela, people know me as, hey, that's the ACLU guy. He's going to be against these bills. We already know it. He's one guy. But if we start having people who typically do not come down to the Capitol, who actually are speaking to these legislators, and there's nothing, I'm going to show a video about it. your legislators or your elected officials are literally your neighbors who just put their name on a ballot. They're not smarter than you. I can guarantee that. They are not. They are not anything that's special, except they are supposed to represent your interests, and they work for you. So breaking down, and I know we've done with data, and I appreciate everybody who's on this panel right now, because again, there's a lot of misinformation out there. Let's get to the real information. And that's what the ACLU has been doing. We've been sending out real information to elected officials. This is a copy of a letter to Representative Camilla Hobson of Albany, Georgia, letting her know about the demographic shifts that have happened before we get the census data. Something where we're going to have a hearing in Albany. We're going to have an ACLU member testify in Albany to make sure that people know these are the type of changes that are going on. So as you can say, the voting age population of color grew by almost 2,000 or 7.7% within this area. And comparing it to other populations that are happening, we know there are racial dynamics that are run throughout Georgia. So we're highlighting that all together. So your representatives can know. We are literally giving these packets to all 236 senators and representatives in your state legislature to know about their districts all together. We're going to update this with the census data, but for right now, kind of like what Ken's doing, we want to give them as much data as possible to say, there's no reason why you couldn't draw a fair map. You had the data to do it. So use this all together. The highlighted portion are things, of course, that we want to populate about the total population going up, the voting age population increasing altogether. These are new voters who are going to be new to this process. How are you going to draw them within lines or draw them out of lines in certain ways? And we've even gone ahead and said, hey, we're going to make it easier for you. Camilla Hobson, you're in House District 153. Well, this is it. If you didn't catch it at the top, we're catching it right here. And not only that, let's look at your surrounding districts too. Compare what you have for your population growth, and definitely dealing with demographics, dealing with age, gender, race, and compare it to the other districts around you. So you can talk to the other members of your delegation, your county delegation, of saying, this is what we should do to fairly represent the people. One of the things that Ken had talked about is an independent redistricting commission. ACLU has been for that. We have literally introduced legislation where senators wrote it of saying we want an independent redistricting commission. Of course, it's not going to happen this year, but that doesn't mean that it's going to stop. Unfair practices, again, being nonpartisan, has happened under Democratic administrations, has been happening under Republican administrations. And you know who pays for that? You do. The people of Georgia do. And that's where we really need to get into changing how this goes all together. So yeah, this is the packet that we send out. We'll have this on our website as well. So you can look at your district and see the comparisons within it. I'm just showing you the length of it. Again, highlighting what Albany and Mr. Representative Hobson is actually representing. You see people of color all together, and then breaking that down from Black, Hispanic, Asian, and white in the overall population. So we're not going to lack data when it comes to redrawing lines. What we are going to lack is ethical integrity when it comes to that, and people's own biases. But what we need from you, and I think we all can agree to this, we need more people testifying at these hearings about what do they want? What do you want when it comes to representation and talking about your public? So if you haven't been to one, let me show you one right now. I hope the volume works.
Athens, Clark County.
Can y'all hear the volume?
Members of the audience, thank you for being here. Thank you for being active in your community. Thank you for voicing these concerns to this legislature. A lot of times people do not speak up for themselves, especially of the things that happen in their community. This is one of the most critical times that you will ever have when it deals with the voting process, redistricting, once every 10 years. And now they are here in your hometown talking about how lines will be drawn. So thank you. My name is Chris Bruce. I'm the political director of the American Civil Liberties Union of Georgia. I'm sorry, I should have started with that. Happy to be here. Happy to see everyone here as well. And to start off, making sure that everyone knows the ACLU of Georgia firmly believes that the right to vote is one of the most sacred civil liberty unions that we enjoy as Americans. We can all agree on to that. And today I want to talk about what's been happening in Athens-Clarke County and the changes that have been happening. If you heard from us before, the ACLU, it's because we have spoken at the last 5 meetings, and we plan on speaking at all 6 further meetings as well, because we are the ACLU of Georgia. We're not the ACLU of Atlanta or the ACLU of Columbus. We want to make sure that all Georgians have their rights to vote, to be heard. In Athens-Clarke County, the amount of growth and diversity has tremendously changed. So to start off, let's make sure we get the numbers right. Looking at the demographic growth in the area, the Asian voting age population and the white voting age populations have both grown by nearly 6%. The Hispanic voting age population has grown by almost 16%, and the Black voting age population has grown by almost 19%. So overall, the people of color, a voting age population in the greater Athens community has grown by just under 18%. And when I say the Athens greater community, I mean Clark, Madison, Oconee, and Oglethorpe counties. These demographic changes must result in maps that reflect the diversity of the greater Athens area to ensure that these voters of color have the same opportunity to elect candidates as other people in Athens enjoy. So we know Georgia has had a history of disenfranchising people of color. Let's be honest about this. And to ensure everyone's sacred right to vote is protected, the maps that the legislature draws must be fair. Fair maps require making sure that the people of color have a voice in this process and that the growing diversity of the greater Athens area is adequately reflected and in the resulting maps that you ultimately create. So the decisions made during this redistricting process will impact, like I said before, the lives of the greater Athens area and countless Georgians for the next 10 years or possibly more. This is a tremendous responsibility before the legislature. It is of the utmost importance that this body work diligently and transparently to ensure that people of color have a voice in this process because democracy demands it. Personally, I am a proud graduate of the University of Georgia School of Law, go Dogs, and I always love coming back to Athens area. These are a group of people who have a tremendous heart when it comes to everyone in this community. I used to work at Georgia Legal Services Program, where I worked with Black and people who came from low income residents. Now, I will respect the time with ending with saying that Athens-Clarke County still ranks as one of the lowest income counties in the nation. And we need to make sure that when they're drawing maps, they have a chance to elect somebody who will speak up for them and their needs altogether. Thank you.
So ending that all together, saying, hey, Athens-Clarke County is a county within itself, has had a tremendous amount of growth, especially in the Black population. That needs to be reflected in the map, and that needs to be reflected with their representatives. So as you can see, you can go up there, you can speak. No one from the audience is going to ask you questions. No one from the legislature is going to stop you. You can, and I've seen some very boisterous individuals, you can literally piece out your mind for them, but they have to hear from you. And if they don't hear from you, then they're going to do whatever they want. So with that, hopefully we have plenty of questions to answer. Happy to be on this panel with everyone else. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, we have quite a few questions for you, and at the time remaining, we hope to be able to squeeze them all in because, you know, what you're doing here, you're giving out a lot of information, Chris, Ken, and Angela. You're providing a lot of information about, redistricting, reapportionment, and we're going to, tell everyone the differentiation between what those are, what those words mean actually. But, being in the news media, it's just something that comes up. We do it, we tell you a story or whatever else. And then you really don't realize that, there are members of the public who don't know. I mean, you don't know, and that's the reason we're there to help them. And that's what we're doing here tonight. And again, thanks to the League of Women Voters of Atlanta, Fulton County for putting on this Redistricting and Reapportionment 2021 Community Series to educate, empower, and engage. Let's start with the questions, why don't we? Right off the bat, Chris, I'm going to ask you this one. When we talk about redistricting and reapportionment, what is the difference? And in your opinion, what do you see as to having the most impact on our communities, or are they equal?
Yeah, I'm glad we're addressing this because that is a very important question. Let's get right down to it. Redistricting is when the lines to each district are redrawn. This applies to all levels of government at which elections are held, from the House of Representatives down to your local school boards. People don't really pay attention to that, but your school board districts can be redrawn as well. And this is supposed to happen every 10 years based on census data, but we live in Georgia. It can be kind of quirky. They can redistrict anytime that they want. Reapportionment, on the other hand, is when the number of representatives allotted to each district is changed. And this is done every 10 years to reflect district data. So reapportionment is literally you have about 50 or 75,000 people are represented by one person in the House of Representatives or the Senate. That could change every year. And this will be changing due to the increase in population in the state of Georgia. But redistricting and reapportionment both carry huge impacts on your community, especially communities of color. Well, for example, when this is done unfairly, aka gerrymandering, basically, underrepresentation happens, especially with certain groups, and we've seen that with people of color all the time, all today. And that can really swing how the legislature goes, and you'll deal with such things as voter suppression bills. You'll deal with anti-abortion bills. You'll deal with not an expansion of Medicaid or healthcare. Those are the reasons that are a direct result of a lack of representation down at the Capitol due to gerrymandering or misalignment or redistricting.
For our map aficionado, and thanks, Chris, for that answer. For our map aficionado, Ken Lawler, what are community maps, and is it too late for residents to draw one?
Yeah, great question. I think that one way to express your desire in terms of how you would like to be represented is to draw your own community map. And there are various tools online that let you do that. District R is one of the tools. Dave's Redistricting app is another one. You can just use any mapping tool you want and try to and basically try to articulate how you draw your, what your community looks like. There's a particular tool I will mention from Princeton University. It's called representable.org, representable.org, which is a tool that lets you define your community, saying, okay, my community happens to be, maybe it's centered around a church community, or maybe it's centered around a business interest, or it might be centered around, like the Atlanta University Center to me would be like a community of interest, right? You define what makes that a community by describing its characteristics in representable, and then you point to a map and literally click and say, here are the blocks of census blocks where that applies, right? And so that tool is a way to capture that input and submit that. Now, the challenge we have with the legislature right now is that the only written testimony they're allowing is plain text. We have asked the legislature for the ability to submit maps or to submit graphics like some of the charts that I was showing you. Right now, we don't have that ability. However, I believe that you can literally you could draw maps, print them out, and mail them to the legislature, and they have to accept that as input. In fact, they're under, right now, the legislature has been advised that they should retain all information submitted to them in whatever form. So all the postcards, any maps you want to submit. So I would say that community maps are a way to express where your community is, what it's all about, describe that community. And what you're asking for when you describe your community is to say, please don't split us up. That Lawrenceville example that I gave you was extreme, where a single city was broken up into 6 chunks. Doesn't make any sense, right? But you can describe that around a church again, or your church community, or the various ways of describing your community. It's up to you as citizens to decide what makes your community a community and to describe that. And then again, right now, the only way to formally submit that to the legislature is literally to put it on paper and literally mail it to the Capitol. And you can mail it to the committees, and you can get the address from the website. We have asked the legislature to allow their written testimony form to allow something beyond plain text, but they have not yet responded to that request. So right now we're stuck with snail mail, but it works.
Okay, thanks very much, Ken, for your answer. So Angela, when we talk about fairness, when it comes to redistricting, how can residents make it a fairer process in your opinion?
Well, the simplest answer is involvement. And and this kind of ties into what the question you asked Ken about community mapping. Even to take that, because community mapping is simply taking and assessing what are the assets in my community. We started community mapping 40 years ago when I was a real youth and was running real youth programs with kids. And so to literally find out whether or not, what resources do you have in your community? And so we took a group of urban young people to map that community. And then we took also in the northern part of town, a group of white kids to talk about what assets are in your communities. And when they came together, they were able to look at what were the racial, economic, environmental concerns that each group had to deal with. And of course, seeing what was happening, rather than being rivals around sports, they began to understand and work more closely around how do we make social justice a real thing for every community. So community mapping is so important. And so even in this process, but also how do we get it down to the ground level that even our children could participate in this process and would want to do it. We've used, back in the day, we used disposable cameras, took pictures. Now you've got a cell phone. There are all kinds of ways to figure out what's going on in your communities to make the argument of what it is that you need in your community. So I was trying to, did I tie that into your, I don't even remember what the question was that you asked me, but I wanted
You did a good job. I just asked you how, you told me that by getting involved, that's one of the ways that residents can make redistricting fairer, right?
You have to. Listen, you got to do the work. People are often trying to figure, there's no, I don't care what you do in life, you got to do the work. And if you haven't put the work and the time in, you're just not going to get the results. And so it's unfortunate that a lot of times in communities where there's just, we are just so overburdened with everything else and all of the isms and schisms that confront us. But at the end of the day, we still got to show up at school board meetings. We still need to, be involved on every level in our communities. And sometimes poverty does not allow us to do that. And it's a difficult process. It's a hard process to ask the folk who are most impacted by a problem to be the ones to help solve the problems. But the reality is that we still have to do it.
Anybody else want to chime in on how residents can make it fairer? We good? Okay. So let's talk more about maps, because I find that intriguing, Ken, I have to tell you. Is there a mechanism to give feedback about problems after the maps are drawn? Are there?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a really good question. People have been asking the committee chairs, Representative Rich and Senator Kennedy, for the opportunity to comment after the maps are released. Right now, they're doing all these hearings before the maps are released. People have been asking for this. We've been asking for that since the hearing started in June. The most recent answer to that question was yesterday in Brunswick, where they again sort of deferred on that question and said, well, we're not quite sure how much time there's going to be. So they're not committing right now to holding hearings after the maps are released. In the past, this process has been sort of rushed through. Back in the 2011 cycle, my understanding, I was not here at the time involved, but I understand that the maps were released and just literally over a weekend, and then the hearing to consider the map was popped into the special session, right? So there was literally no time for people to comment and understand what the maps were doing. You had to go to the hearing, they displayed a map, and then they were taking some testimony. So it's really hard until you've seen the map to understand, and especially you want to look at it from a local perspective. I mean, most of us can't look at an overall map of Georgia and go, well, that looks like a nice map. What do I do with that, right? You want to understand your map in your community and say, what happened to my community, right? So I would say right now we are challenged in that they have not committed to allowing input from the public. I would say a set of hearings after the maps are released. Right. Nonetheless, we're going to try and try to influence that process. we're going to try to quickly evaluate the maps statistically, which is what we can do, and that we can do with computers. We can do it very, very quickly. But I think it's just essential that people understand their community and then provide comment. I just don't know today how they're going to accommodate that. I would say the one thing we know that will happen is that there will be a special session. The committees will meet, the Senate committee and the House committee will meet, no doubt, and probably Chris Bruce has testified at many more committees than I can confirm this, but there will be a chance for the public to sign up and testify. But I don't know. I mean, that's going to be in person at the Capitol, most likely, I would guess. I'm not sure if they're going to do virtual. So right now we're kind of in the dark as to what the input mechanism would be. We're hoping to leverage what's there as best I can tell you, but we're going to continue to advocate for, for having hearings. And one opportunity would be, if you want to sign up to testify at the virtual hearing on Friday, make that your point of testimony. We want hearings after the maps are released. The more they hear that from people, and not just like Chris and myself and Angela, they know what that we're going to say that. But if everybody in Georgia says that, maybe they listen.
And of course, everyone, thank you, Ken, everyone. If you look in the chat, there is a link that's been provided. You can submit your written testimony using the form on the General Assembly website. The link is right there for you in the chat. For Chris now, Christopher Bruce, who of course is the political director for ACLU of Georgia. Chris, for generations of people have been asked to call or to write their legislators to have their votes heard. In today's society, is that still an effective way to be heard?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And to take it all the way back, I'm not going to date myself, but I used to be one of those legislative interns who used to take phone calls all the time. I interned with the Judiciary Committee under Chairman Willard at the time. And actually it was me and two other people. One became the lobbyist for Delta Airlines. The other is now general counsel for the San Antonio Spurs. And I'm political director for the ACLU of Georgia. So you see how that works out. I would like to be lobbyist for Delta Airlines too. So but, I love my job. I love my job though. But what I'm saying here is that when you had a controversial bill, the chairman would literally come in, and remember the chairman controls the agenda, and would say, hey, Chris, how many calls did we get? I'll say, well, Mr. Chairman, we got over 2,000 calls, which is tremendous, especially at that time. Well, how many yeses and how many no's? I would say, well, you had a few who said yes, and you had a lot who said no. A lot of times he would say, oh, we're killing it then. Literally, just based off of that. The emails would come in all the time. And even now we would say that. I would get calls from chairs of committees of saying, can you get your members to stop emailing us? We're not able to do our other work. Well, can you take this bill off the agenda, or can you move our bill too? I mean, so it's a back and forth. It's a way of actually making it happen. Now they have other ways. Some people ignore it, some people don't. But if you have a great ground game in a certain community, these legislators are up every 2 years. So you can vote them in or you can vote them out. And next year, surprisingly, is an election year, and it's going to be a big one. So people are going to be very sensitive what the pieces of legislation that are going to put up. Like redistricting, like anything else, if they don't hear from you, they're going to do whatever they want to do. So you want to use this redistricting as a bellwether of saying, if you don't do this right, we may vote for somebody who will do it right. And the only way they're going to know that is to continue to email, to call, to write letters to your legislator and tell them, we have to do this in a fair, proportionate manner.
And being that you're a member of that younger generation, Chris, how should organizations work to engage the younger generations in the community about redistricting and reapportionment?
Oh, so we're going into what I love to do, social media. So even on I don't even know if I have it on here. You see that at Attorney C. Bruce? Yes, that is my Twitter handle and my Instagram handle and everything. Okay. I normally post everything online because I like to post accurate information. There's so much bad information out there. And young people take that. I tell you what, not to go too deep into it. I was in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago at a TikTok convention. I've never made a TikTok before, but people call me from across the country and saying, Chris, you have a 98-page voter suppression bill. Explain it to me. Say, that's fine. And they'll make it into 15 seconds. So, and then they'll garner so much community engagement on it. So let's talk to people the way they would like to be talked to. If that's through social media, if that's through hand holding, if that's through whatever way it is. It can't just be our way of saying, you need to do this. It needs to be their way, because it needs to be genuine. Otherwise, we become the elected officials again of saying, we don't care what you think. We're going to do what we want to. So let's start uplifting, especially this new generation of voters. And the more we get them involved, the better our society will become.
Okay, thanks, Chris. So Ken, you know, you heard Chris talk about social media, how great it is, and in engaging the younger generations and all of that. Ken, outline your top 2 tools for advocacy that the average citizen can use to be empowered.
Yeah, I'll do that. I want to add one thing on to Chris's comment about the younger
Okay.
generation. There is a group called the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition, which is a group of young high school and young college folks who have gotten involved in this redistricting business. And they have done a wonderful job of articulating their voices at these hearings. Their voices have been raised so well. If you know of anybody who wants to get involved with the younger group, that's a group they've taken up, I think it's 4 or 5 progressive causes, but redistricting is one of them, and they're just knocking it out of the park, just doing a lot of work. So if you do a Google search for Georgia Youth Justice Coalition, they're on Instagram, they're on Twitter, you'll see their handles if you go there. Hook up with them, because they're doing a wonderful job of voicing that generation. And I think in fact, I would say that they're getting really good media coverage because they're coming out and speaking about that, right? So please do that. So back to your question, you know, the kind of your 2 favorite tools. Well, you know, I think that you know, for the speaking as our organization, it's different than speaking as the citizens, right? Our organization, we are strongly in favor of doing all these benchmarking things. We hope this makes a difference. It's a brand new innovation. We're bringing it to Georgia. We're trying to leverage this. We're trying to get the committee to commit to using these benchmarks, right? There's that, and that's very, very new. I think that from the average citizen, I think social media is huge. You know, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We haven't done TikTok yet, Chris. You can give us some hints on that. We haven't gotten there yet, but I think social media is an excellent tool. But I also think, I'll echo what Chris was saying earlier, which was just talk to your legislator in any channel you can. Call them, set up meetings with them. I have personally set up meetings with my state rep and actually my senator I met at the Capitol, but I've tried to reach out personally to them and hold it, even if it's not during the session, during the summer, have a meeting with them and say, let me talk to you about our district and about this process and what I want it to be fair. I think legislators value, personally, my experience, they value input from a constituent above almost anything else. Yes, they listen to a lot of lobbyists, they listen to advocates like our group, but I think if you as a person sit down and have a quality few minutes with that legislator, I think that sticks in their mind. I really do, right? And the more people that have those kind of conversations. So my view is there's this connection to your legislator. Don't be afraid of these folks. I think Chris put it well. They're just your neighbors who decided to put their hat in the ring, and they happen to win the election, right? They're not magical folks. I mean, these are everyday people. They have everyday concerns like everybody else, right? So that you can relate to them. They're relatable people generally, right? So that's the most powerful thing. And then if you want to advocate on a broader scale, I definitely I think social media is, you know, probably you've got several tools at your disposal, and I would encourage using those.
Thank you, Ken. So Angela, what are your 2 favorite forms of advocacy?
The telephone, I still like it. I definitely love social media. In fact, I just followed Chris on Twitter, and I actually put mine up there as well. I was like, dang, that's a great idea. I had never thought about renaming myself, but I just did because of you, Chris.
I'll follow back. Yeah.
So I'm sure he did. Like, he already on his phone. He already saw it. I love it. But I also know that we still have a generation that was born, you know, 1965 and sooner or later, whatever, older, right? I still think we have to touch churches and institutions where our seniors are to get them engaged as well. And it's sometimes easier because they have the time that's on their hands to be able to do this work. So I'm definitely for young and old, and whatever we have to do that. I love bingo with seniors. A lot of times our senior high rises, they run out of food by the end of the month. So taking them some spaghetti and having conversations with them on the importance of these issues is crucial, because they've missed this too. A lot of them have been working class all of their lives. And so don't really understand the census, we don't take the time to educate them. So again, I think it has to be across the board, and to find those avenues where people are doing that work so that we can dream the ideas and just pass it on programmatically to places or organizations that are really engaging whatever the population. So TikTok down to, still pressing the flesh.
I said this about you earlier, Angela, you know how to work the media. So how can the media be utilized to spread the needs of the community more so? And as a resident, how can they engage the media?
The media is just like your, elected official. You can call them up. You can listen. We have so many tricks around the media, from old school to new school. But again, these days, the bottom line is social media. Like, everybody is on Twitter, everybody's on social media, and being able to give them live feed. I think it's still important. We went back in the day, we would build media lists, right? Who to contact for what event, right? Some of that is still important. You still need a media list even if it's digital on your phone, of who you can contact. Engaging the media is so important because they can't be everywhere. And when our issues are that important in the community, we need to bring the media along with us. So we oftentimes have done media educational, sit downs with them as well, to have these conversations even before. And, I've been with some organizations, we do stunts. Greenpeace and environmental stuff back in the day. So we could do anything. I mean, I can dream a whole lot of stuff to get the media's attention, but I think what's important is, how do you have an engaged media? And that work still needs to be done by us. So making sure that, again, your 30-page paper, Chris, needs to be sent to the media so that they understand. Let's give them the tools that they need to at least say, this is interesting. So it's the same way. 10 people saying, can you cover this or talk about this? Works the same way as far as I'm concerned when it comes to the media. And most of them are Dr. Boynton is a friend of our community, and so it's easy with her. It's them other folk who, you got to do a little more work with.
I want to know more about those tricks you were talking about. And of course, I truly, truly do. And Chris, thank you for those 30 pages. We really love those. And when we talk about the media, one thing that I could give you as being a member of the media is, of course, with the pandemic, and you're seeing a lot of corporations and businesses are, they're paring down on their employees. So the more help that you can give us, the better, in terms of, if you do go out and you do have, I don't know, if you stream something, let us know you streamed it. So if anything, we might be able to get some sound bites. And this is, particularly for radio, and then maybe TV, put up your video, whatever else, and we can utilize that on our websites and things of that nature. So, times have changed. You got the social media now, and you can help your media a little bit more by just using, sharing your social media with us. Let us know if it's going to be streamed, because we might not be able to come out that day, or, we might be limited staff that day, but we can still help you in whatever way, shape, or form that we can, as being a member of the media. So as we continue with the questions, I think we had a question that we're gonna get from Tracy. Is Tracy ready to give us that question?
Yes, absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. We have one question in our Q&A, and each of the panelists have touched on this a little bit already, but perhaps if they could just expound upon it. It's a two-parter. What is the practical effect of redistricting and or reapportionment, and what changes might Georgia citizens see following redistricting and or reapportionment?
Who wants to take that first? So Chris, can you answer that for us?
Let's go into this. I'll give one example and then go to another example, okay? For example, again, still taking it from a nonpartisan lens, President Biden won Georgia by 11,000 votes. Senator Raphael Warnock won his race by about mid-90s, 90,000. Senator Ossoff about 60,000. That made a significant change on the federal level when it came to the stimulus check, when it came to the child tax credits and everything else. But guess what? Georgia, on the other hand, for it to flip partisan lines, you need Democrats need to pick up 16 seats. Now, you're for that or against that, it's one thing, but this is the fact. So remember, all last news cycle, we talked about a voter suppression bill. If those 16 seats had been picked up, you would not have had that conversation altogether. If those 16 seats had changed hands, you probably would not have had the same type of bill. Reapportionment and redistricting deal with the same thing. When you're redistricting, you're talking about the lines of legislators and their parties literally having power or not having power. So you can do things, and a lot of people focus on what happens on the federal level, but on the local level, if you're for something or against something, this is why we're always advocating. Tell your legislator, and again, I don't care about the party lines, tell your legislator of exactly what you want. But if they're drawing more lines for it to be friendlier to a certain party, instead of being friendlier to a certain interest group or a community of interest, that's wrong. And you will find that and you will feel that with anti-abortion bills, with lack of expanding healthcare or hospitals going down, or with voter suppression bills that have happened in so many different areas. So redistricting, literally how they are drawing these lines, you can have a coloring book and draw the lines the way that you want to, but when that state legislator, when it comes to voting, that's when you're going to feel the impact of it. I hope that made sense.
Did to me, and I like your shirt too. So Angela, you wanted to chime in on that?
Let Ken go. I want to see the shirt. Oh, black. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, isn't this light? I love wearing this. I've got about 5 of them. So
okay, I need one.
Rhea,
you can send me a large.
Okay.
XL will be accepted.
In fact, I think I have a pink one in line. So if you want that one, you get that.
I love it.
I'm obviously dressed wrong, but it is what it is. But I want to echo what Chris said. I think that, you know, legislation, the way the legislature runs their business is highly determined by how safe they feel the seats are. It really does. And in Georgia, I'll just give you a couple of statistics. In the 2020 election, half of the state House and Senate seats, roughly, were contested. Half were not even contested. Sometimes the maps are drawn so poorly that it discourages people from running. It's not an easy job to run, but if the map is drawn to really obviously favor somebody in your area, it's going to predetermine the outcome of the election, right? And so, and that 50%, just so you understand that 50% contested or uncontested, whichever way you want to look at it, was a low for Georgia over the last few cycles. Back in 2016, it was 80% uncontested. That's how tilted it was, right? Nationally, the average is only 35% uncontested or 65% contested. So Georgia lags behind. We have too many safe seats. One of the things we are looking at very carefully is are we getting enough competitive seats? More competitive seats will give you a more balanced legislature, will avoid the things that Chris was talking about, because people have to, you know, the legislators have to be reelected every 2 years, and they can't just, you know, kowtow to the extreme of one party over the other, right? And so it makes a huge difference in terms of the way your legislature really runs as to how safe they feel and whether they have to listen to U.S. constituents and how safe they're concerned about their election.
Well, thank you very much. Hey, we've swept through this redistricting in Georgia. What is it? How will it affect you? You guys are awesome this evening. And so now we're going to do a quick wrap up. Going to allow each panelist to just give us a couple of minutes to wrap up your words of wisdom, so to speak. Angela, we start with you.
Oh, sure. Because we know that Black women matter.
Of course.
And we do. And I would even chiming in on the last portion around how does this become practical. Back in the 90s, we made the legislature of Georgia stay. It was the second longest session, but we had young people, we had mothers who met with, who we harass because they had bills back in the day where children were being prosecuted as adults and put in adult prisons. You all may have remembered the case of someone named Little B back in the day. And so what we were saying was, this is unacceptable. We brought in everybody that we could possibly, from, you know, the scientists to the attorneys, to make these arguments back in the day. It works, y'all. And so the state of Georgia has a hard time prosecuting children as adults and putting them in adult prisons. And so what I would say is, if you're not involved, if you're not a part of the solution, really you're a part of the problem. And we need all hands on deck all the time. There is no part of this that we can just, you know, leave to Chris or leave to Ken or leave to the League of Women Voters. All of us have to be involved. And if you don't know how to get involved, listen, call me. 404-593-5981. I can give you a plethora, but you can Google these organizations that are out there, your city government, your county government. There are so many ways to get involved. Your church. And if you are not vaccinated, vax up. ATL, vax up. Fulton County, vax up Georgia. Listen, it's time out for playing. We have so much work to do, and all hands, literally all hands, need to be on deck, because all of these issues are so crucial as we continue to march forth into the 21st century. Thank you all.
Great, Angela, thank you. If not now, Ken, when, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, I think this process that we are living within in Georgia is not designed for public participation. We are
Right.
Trying our best. First of all, I want to say, get involved. The best two words: get involved. That's what Angela said. There's ways to get involved, right? There's some hearings left. There will be hearings at the session, written testimony, call your legislator. Just, there's many channels that you can exercise to try to get involved. If you're looking for channels to get involved, you can come to our website, Fair Districts Georgia. We have several programs: letters to the editor, postcarding. It all adds up, right? I can't tell you which one's going to where the tipping point is. I just know that by continuing to get involved and stay involved, it works, right? We'll do our best to keep everybody informed as we see the process unfold. But at the end of the day, get involved is the name of the game, because, you know, Fair Districts Georgia, we're about 30 volunteers. It makes a difference when there's 10,000 people talking about this and not just 30. It really does.
What do you have for us, Chris? Saying good night. Your words of wisdom, young man.
Oh, Maria, first off, I want to say thank you, Maria, for hosting a great panel. You did an excellent job. Angela and Kim, I know we're going to be in this fight again later on, so enjoy fighting with you. President Hines, thank you for having me. Thank you for reminding me. I only had 10 minutes to jump on too. Yeah, she's on it. And I'll start with what Angela said. Black women matter. And the reason why I start there, I love history. To the point of saying, ever since Black people had the right to vote, people have been trying to take away that right, literally. And you know, the last group to have the right to vote, Black women. So we went through Black codes, we went through literacy tests, grandfather clauses, Jim Crow. Now we're going through Jim Crow 2.0 line. But like I said before, Black women were the last ones to get the right to vote. Now they are the demographic that votes highest amongst any other demographic that you have altogether. So when it says trust Black women, you really should. And you know what? Who's going to be impacted by redistricting the most? Black women. Why? Because again, they have the highest voting power. We're talking about changing elections altogether. So this really goes along with your self-interest altogether. But your self-interest, like Black women, have cared about the community altogether. So we want to make sure that going into the next legislative session, going into elections, fair maps, everything else, think about it. Black women matter. And that's what you should be saying to yourself when you're out there testifying and thinking about how we're going to go forward later on. So thank you for having me. Happy to help out later on as well.
Everyone, thank you. And just want to let you know, on the air in the morning, I have Senator Raphael Warnock talking about just the necessity for passing voting rights legislation and all of that. He talks about all of that. So that's coming up tomorrow. So again, I would just like to thank President Nicola Hines and the League of Women Voters of Atlanta, Fulton County, for inviting me to moderate this panel this evening. I learned a lot. It's something that happens every 10 years, and I echo what they're saying, everybody. Get involved, everyone now. President Hines.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight for our second part of our Redistricting and Reapportionment community series to educate, empower, and engage. And today was all about empowering. And I hope everyone who's listening to this really walked away with some great advocacy tools and know how to be empowered moving forward. I believe, as Ken had mentioned, it's going to be like kind of mid-fall when a special session is going to go into place. So it is very important to still have your voice heard. Redistricting is supposed to be a nonpartisan activity. You know, political gerrymandering would be detrimental in so many areas of our lives, from public education to congressional districts. Fair maps are what we need to ensure that people holding the seats at the table represents all interests and not just a few. So just remember that. We need everybody's voice heard, regardless of where you sit on the aisle. It needs to be a nonpartisan, transparent activity from our legislators. With that said, I first want to say thank you so much, Sora Dr. Maria Boynton, for moderating tonight. I so appreciate you answering that call. Didn't even have to put it on the shield. I just sent it to you. So I appreciate that. I want to say thank you, Angela Brown, Chris Bruce, and Ken Lawler for joining us and sharing your knowledge and your information with our community. It is so important that they hear from the experts and understand this important cause. I want to say thank you to the Legal Women Voters Special Committee for Redistricting for stepping up to the call to help for this important information. Just to let everyone know that we are planning 2 more webinars. Our hopes, and hopefully, fingers crossed, that it would include both House and Senate committee members. We're trying to do a more structured type of town hall. So we've already invited everybody. I think it's close to 30, 35 members total. We've already invited all, so we're hoping that we at least get some of them to participate. The proposed dates are August 31st and September 1st, so please look out for that. You can follow us, since everyone was talking about social media. We are very simple. We are LWVAF, regardless of where you are, on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. We're not on TikTok yet, so maybe I'll get a little break or something like that. We find a young intern that can do TikTok. So, but that's where you can find us. And of course, I would not be a good president if I did not solicit about joining our organization. So 1, we are a nonpartisan political organization. We have members that are on all sides of the aisle, not just left and right. We have third parties. We have, our liberals, our conservatives, our moderates. We have everybody, and everybody's voice is heard through our organization. Second, we are not just legal women voters. We also have male voters and non-conforming or non-gender, or sorry, the politically correct word, for everybody. So we have all members of all likes. You just have to be 18 years old and older. We also have student membership, and we also have family membership. So please go to lwvaf.org/join, and you can see all the membership things you have. I will give you a hint if you do live with someone or have a friend to join as a family. It's a lot cheaper. But with that said, once again, thank you so much. And I hope to see everybody in August when we do our part 3 and part 4 of our webinar. Appreciate everyone, and have a great night.